Welcome to Books with Noah, a podcast where I talk with my friends about their favorite books. Today, Andy is joining me to talk about David Epstein's book, Range. Andy is a life coach in Austin, Texas, and he is well-traveled and has many interesting past lives. Andy, welcome to Books with Noah.
Hi, Noah. Thanks for having me. I look forward to it.
So glad you're here. This is a book that changed my life, and I think you got a lot of value out of it. And so the title of the book is Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. So why don't we start there? David Epstein is pushing back on this idea that, the stereotypical success is somebody who decides what they're going to do. They either work their way up the corporate ladder or they decide to get a PhD in some narrow, obscure science topic. And David Epstein is saying, no, there are other possibilities out there. So why don't you walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I full disclosure, I think I love this book on its own merit, but even more so because it made me feel better about my own journey, right? When we talk about the Harvard group and the Dark Horse study, which, his disclosure is, I later was invited to join this group because of my vast and broad peripatetic winding experience. And, I don't remember his exact words, but I was like, wait a minute, maybe they would invite me to join. I've done that. And so, I think that was the thing for me is that I totally understand what he's talking about because I had a friend my sophomore year of undergraduate who was pre-med and he studied all the time and, I never saw him. And I remember asking him one time because I had been a math major, which was the most obvious thing. It made sense to me. The world made sense to math. I always got right answers. I felt good, right? It was black and white. And I went on the invitation of a professor who later became a mentor to study in Vienna for 5 weeks at the end of my freshman year. And it was like suddenly, oh my God, like there's this giant world out there. And I had been to, my family didn't have much money. I had been to DC for the 8th grade trip to, see all of the wonderful buildings and monuments in Washington, D.C. And then for my senior year of high school, I'd been to New York to visit the United Nations and, really experience New York. You don't go to see New York, you go to kind of like smell it and taste it and be part of it. And so, that was it, right? And so I left Texas to go to undergraduate study in Nashville. But this trip to Vienna was kind of like the big, eye-opening moment, right? So I come back for sophomore year, and I'm studying my roommate. It's I won't say his name, just for privacy. But he's telling me, I've always known I was pre-med, and I'm asking him. I don't think I was terribly sophisticated. I think I was trying to understand why I had trouble committing to something. And when I asked him the question, well, how did you know for sure? His response to me was, well, and it was as if it was the first time he had thought about it for too long. And he said, you've met my brother, his only sibling. He just finished undergrad and is a first year med student. And then my dad is a doctor. And I was like, oh, well, how obvious. And I think at that point I thought well, that's normal. And I think to Dave's point, which he does, and I mean David Epstein. I shouldn't call him Dave, like we just had coffee this morning. But I think he does mention at the end, he's not necessarily being hypercritical of somebody like that, who's like, I want to go and study, oncology. Actually, I want to study pancreatic oncology. Actually, I want to, somebody who hyper specializes. I think what he's saying is that we've gotten a little bit carried away and over intoxicated with the value of hyper specialization. If you did have pancreatic cancer, you'd want that hyper specialist, right? But you might also want a group at help me out here, Noah. What is the group that was formed? Remember, it has a clever name. Um, it was the company that got formed later to answer questions that were posed by other entities.
Oh, yes.
It has a clever name that
Can't
didn't
remember.
obviously didn't stick with me, but that's my fault, not theirs.
Right.
Anyway, you want both, right? And I think that's the thing, right? Like coming to realize which one you are and being okay with that, right? I came to realize, you know what? I think I'm a hyper sampler. I think I should celebrate my curiosity and courageously pursue it, even if it means discomfort and some failures, rather than lamenting the fact that I don't that I don't have this obvious a priori right vision for Andy.
Yeah.
You will be an intellectual property attorney. There it is. I had a vision. I'm going to pursue it. I just don't think, and the data that at least I have not researched David Epstein's, long list of resources, but it totally resonates with me anecdotally in terms of everything I've experienced.
Yeah, I think that's a key point that you just mentioned is that sure there's some people out there that have that guiding vision. They know what they want and they go after it and that's great, but most people don't. And the idea that you can somehow meditate in a corner or do some introspection with some guru, Western or Eastern, your pick, that you're going to suddenly figure out what that is you're supposed to do. He says, no, you need to go out there, you need to try different things and fail and succeed and see what you like, because the answer is not necessarily within you. It could be out there. And just that encouragement of trying different things and see what resonates and what sticks to the wall. I really like that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we encourage that. I mean, you went to school more recently than I did. I finished my master's 15 years ago. But I don't know that in certain circles, right, obviously artists, I mean, I think David Epstein studied as a scientist for a long time. I don't know that in science, and I'm thinking he has, I think chapter 5 is about analogical thinking. And before
And what is
this,
that? Sorry. What is analogical thinking?
so going back to, I don't even know, I've not known you for a super long time, but we've had many good conversations, often around books and interesting authors or people and theories and a lot of stuff around the things that David Epstein talks about. But when he talked about hyper specialization, and he was like, sometimes, do you remember the part about where he talks about cardiologists, like, well, we'll just stent it. We'll put in a stent, even though stents don't. I don't know any cardiologists, but I kind of wanted to get like at least 2 of them in a room and be like, seriously, is this close to accurate in terms of what you guys are getting for data from your collective groups and like the people who are making money off selling stents? Because that seems not only not helpful, but it seems as if you're capitalizing on people's misfortune, and that was frustrating to hear. But it immediately reminded me of, I did a lot of nutrition and wellness research. I did a nutrition licensure program through the Cornell Online, and there is I don't know exactly how old he is. He's about 90. His name's T. Colin Campbell, and he has been a biochemical nutritional researcher, PhD, for longer than I've been alive, I think. And he did the China study was his sort of seminal work, right? Is based on a collective study about China and all of these different incidents of cancer. And the one thing that he says all the time is that all of the National Institute of Health, the government entity that doles out funding and approves all this research that we do to help us live better and understand what to eat and what not to eat and all of those things, all of them are hyper specialized. And so and he talks about it, he says, we had to tailor all of our requests for fulfillment for funding for any kind of science research that they wanted to do. If it was anything broad, that there was a scientist like him, T. Colin Campbell, who'd done decades of research, who said, I want to, explore the space between these two, incidents of this cancer and protein levels or whatever it was. He said that they would often dismiss it as a fishing expedition. And it immediately made me think of like what David Epstein's talking about, which is, I understand how you want to keep people measuring, like, this is what our objective is and this is how we're going to measure it. So you're not just giving us a bunch of money and then later we say like, oh, we didn't find anything. But we had a great time for 12 months. And so I understand it, but it does seem like it's holding us back in certain domains, maybe many domains.
That's too bad. Yeah. Cool story. That makes a lot of sense. So moving on, we know that a lot of these books have one chapter that is just the star, and all of the other chapters in retrospect seem to be just supporting content for that chapter. And I think we both agree that in this book, it is chapter 7. And why don't we start talking about match quality? Because I think that plays into what we were talking about, how trying different things, seeing what sticks, and that connotation of failure, right? You tried something, it didn't work. It doesn't mean that you're a failure or that you're a bad person. It could just be match quality. So why don't you explain what match quality is and talk about that chapter and what it meant to you?
Yeah, I concur. Lucky number 7. I really, chapter 7 for me, I must have gone over it 3 times. And I found it fascinating in almost every aspect of what he included. And you're right, like the concept of match quality. So I don't know how widely used that is outside of economics, but you and I are both fans of economics. I wish that educators and anybody involved in counseling, coaching, mapping, wayfinding for really anyone would use the term, because to me, and I'll give you sort of like my own, what I came away with, like it is the symbiosis, the sort of reciprocity between, is this job going to be, or am I going to be a good fit for this job in terms of my temperament, demeanor, skill set, background, experience? And then the question that I think some people don't always ask is, and is the reverse also true? Is this particular job, company, structure, culture, is it going to be sustainably satisfying, regenerative, supportive, a good fit, right? A good match for me. And I think that that's easy enough to understand, right? In theory. But then in practice, so maybe I should add at this juncture what I did for over a decade. I left a tech career and went back to school, got a master's in education, got a teaching license, proceeded to do some other experimental things like moving a couple times, traveling, teaching various things, studying Spanish intensively in Buenos Aires. And then came back to Austin and decided to just start teaching some SAT classes. A friend of a friend had a local test prep company, and I was like, oh, that'll get me teaching, it'll keep me working, it'll get me exploring, and it won't take up so much of my time that I can't figure out what my next move is going to be in terms of what am I going to try next professionally. And I discovered that I really enjoyed doing it, and I really enjoyed helping the kids understand not so much just how to read a paragraph and understand the main idea, right? Because that's a useful skill and that's helpful, but a lot of people are better readers than I am. But understanding that the strategies that you can use in being better at an SAT, PSAT, ACT, whatever it is, they're also great life strategies. And I'll tell you what I mean, right? I would work with them on like, here's what you want to do. You want to figure out what do you already know and have mastery of, and hang on to that. And what do you have no clue what's being asked? Let that go for a minute. That's outside of your domain, outside of your scope, outside of what you should invest energy into, right? But I'll bet you there are some questions that you were shocked to know that you missed. Let's start there, because that's a space where you had enough confidence and familiarity to think that you might, you probably, yeah, you know that. You know what you're doing. Like, this is within your range, so to speak. And that same strategy, that's where you need to invest your energy, and then you move on from there, right? So I mentioned that because the other thing that we would do is, why are you taking an SAT or an ACT? Because you want to go to a good college, you want to have more collegiate opportunities, you want to get a scholarship, you want more job opportunities, you want all of these things so that you can do what? For, be educated, yes, but for many people, especially for parents who are investing six figures in paying for their kids' undergraduate education, right? They want to know that my kid is going to have about the same opportunity for a socioeconomic life that I have had. Maybe better, but probably nowadays people would settle for as good of a life, right? Many upper middle or even some middle class people would probably be fine with that. So now I'm looping back finally to match quality. So when we talk about match quality, it's only something you can arrive at when you know yourself to a certain degree, when you've done some living, when you've had some experiences, right? He mentions a woman, I don't remember her first name, Ermina or something like that, Ibarra from the London organizational behaviorist from the London Business School. And she says, we learn who we are only by living. And I can't tell you how much I agree, and how much my 20 to 30 something year old self wished I could have written that down on a piece of paper and just pulled it out on a train or at any other juncture where I felt a little bit confused, or maybe wishing I were on track when all I needed to know was that being off track may be where you should be. In the not knowing and in the trying something is the discovery. It may just take some time. So
Right.
yeah. So final thought on match quality, and then I'll let you have a minute to ponder. But it's very difficult for an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old or even a 22-year-old, not so much just by age, but because they haven't been able to do a lot of experimentation. We keep them in this formal schooling education system. And so it's very difficult to start to discover things about yourself other than I'm better at math than I am at English, right? I like going to music class more than PE, right? They're all comparative. And so to that, I would say, in terms of, trying to offer a suggestion or advice like I used to do for all of my students, go explore, go discover, go try something new. If you're stuck at home because you're in school, or right now we're still in the, hopefully the final months of quarantine, pandemic style, explore what you can explore. And by all means, when the world opens back up again, take advantage of it. Go away. Go away to a place that doesn't terrify you, but it scares you a little, right? If you have family members, you could move across state or across state lines or across the country, go do that. Eventually move outside of our borders. If that just means you go to Montreal, that's fine. A lot of people speak French there. It will be different. The one thing that won't be different initially is you. All of the external influences, parents, professors, expectations, strip all of those away. And I guarantee you, if you can sit with that discomfort and you can try and pay attention and explore some things, you won't be the same. And that's a good thing. We're always growing. I'm going to let you take it from there, Noah.
Yeah, I like it. I think we both have traveled a lot, and that's made us who we are. I had a snarky comment, is that the people in Montreal speak French the way the people in Buenos Aires speak Spanish.
Beautifully?
Sure, we'll go with that.
No me digas eso. Yeah, I've been to Montreal, but my French consists of 17 words, so I wouldn't know that. Did you find it difficult to understand?
I think so. Yeah. And just going back to match quality, I think a great analogy would be dating, right? You have two great people with a really poor match quality, and it's nobody's fault. You just move on until you find, a good match quality. I like everything that you mentioned. I mean, I have a confession, which is that I decided I wanted to be an electrical engineer when I was 13 years old. And I did it. And in my super senior semester, year 5, I was in senior design. We were working on a project, and I was like thinking, maybe I should have done computer science, but I wasn't about to go spend another 4 years. So I was like, electrical engineering is good enough. And then 28 comes by, and I was like, well, maybe it's time to try something different. I don't know. And this book and these chapters are saying, that's how life works, and that's fine. That's okay. It's not like I'm a failure because I did something and I want to try something else, or that just because I have a path that's not waking up in the morning, working in a career for the same company for 30, 40 years, or even bouncing between different companies doing the same thing for 30 or 40 years. It's okay. And just to hear the extraordinary stories that he tells of different people and how they ended up where they are. Everyone from Paul Graham, the Y Combinator guy, to the Girl Scout lady. I forget her name. That's such a good story.
Hasselbeck. Yeah, wasn't she fascinating? I was like, man, if that
Amazing.
woman had been like my grandmother, how would I have looked at life, right? And so I think that's what, instead of being bitter about that, I think what I'd like to do is think maybe I could be that influence on, people younger than I, to say, don't get stuck. Don't think there's something wrong with you. Keep exploring, right? Keep pursuing your curiosity, and watch the very short TED Talk if you don't want to invest a lot of time in everything that we're talking about now. I don't know if you did, but the Dan Gilbert, chapter 7, they reference his end of history illusion. And it's fascinating, this notion that all of us want to feel like, for, I think, maintaining a sense of sanity and stability and goodwill. Like, I know myself, like, here's who I am. And what Dan Gilbert is basically demonstrating is that you're always evolving. The rate of change may slow down a little bit as you move into middle age and beyond that, but you are always changing your preferences, to some extent your values, what's important to you. And I think the suffering comes in the wishing that weren't so. That if we could just embrace that and not be like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do because tomorrow I'm going to be somebody different. I think it's both. And that's a defining mantra that I have. You've probably heard me say it before, but it's really both. And it doesn't mean that you can't decide, is there a God? Is there not a God? Well, sometimes there is, sometimes, it's not something, amazingly existential and esoteric. And I'm just saying, if you can accept the fact that here's where I am right now on this day and time, and what I think I'm curious about, and go test drive that, right? Create mini experiments, right? To flirt with your potential selves. Is that what he titled?
Yes, that's how he said it.
If you can do that, knowing that some of it's going to change, some of it's going to stay with you, and there's a beautiful harmony in that, of just, man, this is fun, and I don't know where I'm going to end up. And in a year, I might, look, I know that you're about to move, right? You're about to move to Europe. And that's one of the most exciting things that you can do. And it also comes with probably some light to moderate trepidation around.
That's correct.
But where will I live? And as you've mentioned to me before, I'm trying to sell this, it's like a bedroom set. And it's like, oh my God, that's so unimportant, but you still have to do it, right? And it still weighs on you, and it still is another thing on your list that you have to check off. And so if you cannot get bogged down by the list checking and actually pay attention to the exploring that you're doing, and the feedback that you're getting, and not seeing it as, like you said, like dating, right? Seeing it as well, I might meet this really interesting person, and if I don't, that's fine too. There'll be another day, and what can I learn here, right?
Right. That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Andy. This has been a fun conversation, and thanks for being part of Books with Noah.
Absolutely. I hope to return on a future episode. But for now, thanks for having me, and enjoy the mountains while you can.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Books with Noah. Please visit our website, bookswithnoah.com. You can also find us on YouTube by searching Books with Noah.